All right, 2B, one of my favorite topics, sphere sovereignty. If you can say societal sphere sovereignty 5 times fast, I will give you $10. I mean, this is, but anyway,
I'm not going to embarrass myself. Go ahead, read the
no, no, no,
section
no. All
there.
right, here's the paragraph. Uh, there are distinct communal spheres or kinds of communities. Each kind of community is distinguished from other kinds by its own intrinsic nature, differently characterized in its organization and purpose, governed by its own God-given norms. For example, there are familial, ecclesial slash faith, political slash civil, commercial, social, charitable, medical, educational, and aesthetic slash arts kinds of communities, among others. No single kind of community properly encompasses or regulates all the others, nor does any particular community of a given kind properly encompass or regulate all the others of that same kind. Each kind of community has its own particular function and its own kind of limited authority and competence directly ordained by God, not mediated by any other kind. This has been called sphere sovereignty. We reject the collectivistic view of so-called subsidiarity, which, while seeking to be bottom up, affirming that the lowest level of organization has original jurisdiction, nevertheless subsumes all societal communities as so-called mediating institutions under an all-encompassing state. Whew, it's a mouthful. So, what is, in your own words, what is sphere sovereignty?
Well, at the end there, we distinguish it from subsidiarity, or a collectivistic understanding of subsidiarity. And that's become increasingly popular among conservatives through Roman Catholic social teaching. But that's no answer.
Right.
Subsidiarity is no answer, or the collectivistic understanding of it is no answer, because it's, in a way, just another form of collectivism. It's just decentralization. But society is not the state. The state is not the perfect community, as they say, of society. And you can't, you're not dealing with society as God created it if you have that kind of conception. And you'll see reference to mediating institutions. Well, that's not sphere sovereignty.
So this, in sorry to interrupt you, but in subsidiarity,
Yeah.
all the different spheres are ultimately under the bigger umbrella of the state.
Yeah, effectively, they're just lower levels.
Wow.
And so that's the idea, that original, they what they say is everything should be done at the lowest level possible. The lowest level has original jurisdiction in doing whatever it is that needs to be done. Sometimes they sort of hierarchicalize, and you can sort of see where this comes out of Roman Catholic thought, with the chain of being, right?
Yeah.
Chain of being in the hierarchical society.
Right.
So they're just placing individuals and families and so on at the bottom and saying, well, let's just be bottom up.
Mm.
But if it's one thing,
Right.
and somewhere up there the state encompasses everybody and everything, that doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
That's just another aspect of collectivism. So
I know that Tom Woods, he's Roman Catholic and a libertarian, an
yeah,
anarcho-capitalist, I think is how he's described. I'm assuming that the book that he wrote on subsidiarity is a call to, I think it's called Beyond Subsidiarity. So I think I'm assuming then that what he's saying is that we've got to move beyond just
well,
this. Like,
he has two books that I think discuss in some fashion Catholic social thought.
okay,
The one you just mentioned is Beyond Distributivism, I think.
okay, I'm thinking the wrong thing.
But
Okay,
he may address that in there. I don't know. The other one is Church and the Market, where he also addresses Catholic social teaching.
okay.
I think
No, you're
so.
right. I was incorrect. I was misthinking about which Catholic social teaching he's addressing and
Yes,
critiquing,
well,
I believe.
distributivism, or however the term is something that a lot of people have put forward as Catholic social teaching, and of course, what Tom Woods has written on that is very helpful, I think,
Mm.
in undermining that claim,
Mm.
showing that's not the case, that distributism or distributivism doesn't have that standing in official Catholic social teaching. In any case, I'm sure he does address subsidiarity at some point, but I'm not really as familiar with what he says about it. I'll have to look into it. But in any case, I think certain expressions of it, if not the idea of subsidiarity itself, right?
Okay.
So there's sort of a collective interpretation of it, if not that just the collective interpretation is what subsidiarity is. Some Reformed people have actually tried to argue for an understanding of subsidiarity that's basically sphere sovereignty. So I don't know what their point is, because that's just sphere sovereignty. So sphere sovereignty.
Well, neo-Calvinists are really good at taking ideas that already exist and saying, we got this new idea.
That's really our idea.
Yeah,
exactly.
We're great at that.
In any case, the most important thing here is that, and really this relates to, you could say, Reformed social teaching, even under establishmentarian thought within Reformed thinking or confessional teaching. Nevertheless, the character and mission of the Church of Jesus Christ must be kept distinct, right? So the church cannot be blended into society as a whole, or any other community, or civil governance, or the state, or whatever. And so that simple distinction is key confessionally for Reformed Christians. On the other hand, or with that distinction, or the basis for that distinction actually applies to all the different kinds of communities. In other words, it's not, I mean, most importantly, you could say the church is not to be sort of like ambiguated into like the whole of society, or meshed with the state or something, but also civil governance and the family and business and these other kinds of communities are distinct by virtue of God's norms in creation, his creational ordinances. And this is a crucial bulwark against statism and tyranny. Because if sovereignty, if a kind of sovereignty exists for other forms of community, where the state, basically what that means is the state is not, should not interfere with the inner life of these other communities. That's a kind of limit. Admittedly, it's also a sort of external limit, but it involves the idea that there's a norm within each of these communities that sets their own inner limits, and that applies to the state, or applies to civil governance rather. So God's norming character of different communities limits different kinds of communities so that they cannot transgress their own sphere of sovereignty.
On a practical note, what happens practically when we fail to recognize the importance of sphere sovereignty?
Well, the most lethally dangerous result is an overbearing state, right? That begins to not just crack down on things beyond crime that we might not prefer, but then also impinges on, for example, the mission of the church.
Yep.
right? So in authoritarian, totalitarian societies where the state says we can't tolerate this rival to full allegiance to us, full allegiance to Caesar cannot be tolerated.